Order. Reading Municipal Light Board of Commissioners. This meeting of the Reading Municipal Light Department Board of Commissioners is being broadcast at the RMLD's office at 230 Ash Street, Reading, Mass. Live broadcasts are available only in Reading due to technology constraints. This meeting is being videotaped for distribution to the community television stations in North Reading, Wilmington, and Lynnfield. Just in terms of opening remarks, we always start with the Code of Conduct. I'd like to read that for everyone's. The RMLD Board of Commissioners recognizes the importance of hearing public comment at the discretion of the chair on items on the official agenda as well as on items not on the official agenda. We ask that all questions or comments from the public be directed to the chair and that all parties, including members of the RMLD Board, act in a professional and courteous manner when addressing the board or responding to comments. Once recognized by the chair, all persons addressing the board shall state their name and address prior to speaking. It is the role of the chair to maintain order in all public comment or ensuing discussion. Thank you. I think in terms of people here today, we've got George Hooper from the CAB. George, welcome.
Thank you.
Nice to have you. And we've got the selectman from Wilmington. Is that North Reading?
Right.
Yes, thank you. Okay. In terms of we're to public comment, is there any public comment? If not, I'd like to move on to the approval of the board minutes, which is in tab A. Do we have any issues or comments? Bob, Commissioner Soley?
Page 3, 1, 2, 3, 3 paragraphs down, the fourth line. It says one may be a town meeting member, and it should say maybe a light commission member.
Where is that?
Should be, oh, so that's the fourth line down in the third paragraph down.
Yes.
It understands that one may be a, instead of town meeting member, should be
Light commission member.
light commission member. And Commissioner Soley, could I ask you to be the secretary for tonight's meeting?
Okay.
Okay, thank you. Okay, are there any other changes we should address?
A very small thing on page 7, the second line. I believe the RMLD way to put down kilowatt hours is K, capital W, and then H.
Right, KWH instead of KWHR.
Yeah.
Are there any other changes?
No.
No? May I have a motion to
So moved, Mr. Chairman?
second, please? Second. All
As
in favor?
corrected, excuse me, as corrected.
As corrected, of
Yes.
course. On approval? Great, thank you. Let's see, we've got report of the chairman. We're going to have an update on the charter committee. This will be given by Vice Chair
Okay, very
Gino.
good. Okay, as I mentioned at our last meeting, that the town of Reading has actually formed a committee that's looking at the home rule charter. And there's some handouts that I've given you that say home rule charter. I think I put a few extras on the table here if people want to get them. This is basically the change. I made copies of the 3-5, which is some of the things that the Charter Commission, which I'm a member of, being a former finance, I also was one time a finance committee chairman, but also being a former bylaw committee chairman. I'm actually on that committee, probably very qualified to be on there. And what we've got here is in terms of 3-5, The changes that have been made is actually, we've actually stated that it's Board of Commissioners, which is our official title under 164, that you can see. The second paragraph, in terms of what's been removed, that's actually defined by 164, so that's the Charter Review Committee felt that was unnecessary. In terms of that, the other is just, in the fourth paragraph, you can see there, the Municipal Light Board of Commissioners shall hire the general manager and set the duties and terms of employment. We actually felt, that the committee felt, in terms of compensation, things like that, that it's really not something that's necessary, that, it's actually the commission that sets the duties and terms of employment on that.
Let me ask a question
Sure.
on that,
Yep.
if I may. So,
Mhm.
the impression of that is that the compensation, et cetera, was inclusive of the duties and terms?
Yes, exactly, in terms of that,
I see.
so. And those are the only, other changes than just changing the name from Municipal Light Board to Municipal Light Board of Commissioners, in terms of that. The other one I'm giving you was 4-10, and that really, there's some new wording there.
Before we go
Yeah,
there,
sure.
there's
Very good.
one, the Municipal Light Board of Commissioners shall employ the auditor appointed by the Town of Reading
Yeah.
Audit Committee.
Okay,
My understanding was that we had the flexibility and freedom to use whatever auditor we wish to use.
well, that's, okay. We need to revisit history now. These changes came about at the time of the Inspector General's report. I don't know how many in this room have actually seen that report. I know I did in 2001. There were a couple things that were recommended by, there was a special committee to review, and these are some of the changes that they made. First off, that the change was to that the board would have direct hiring of the accounting manager and the chief accountant, because it was their feeling, and from the feedback they got, is that the accounting manager did not feel he'd come to the board and bring those items that were discussed back at the time of the Inspector General's report. So that was the line that was created, so that the accounting manager could actually bring those items to the board, as opposed to having to go to the general manager on those. In terms of the 30B, that's something that we fought at the time, and the town insisted that be in there. Now, it's up to I read the memo from Rubin and Rudman, that the May 2013, which is interesting, because I believe that same memo came out back in 2001.
We're getting double duty out of it.
Yes. And basically, we don't have to follow it. Now, you gotta remember, at that time, how do I put this nicely? There was discussion among the town to make this committee appointed, which was really one of the fights that went on. I don't think the outside towns would have been particularly pleased with that outcome, quite truthfully. So, there were some things that maybe we it's up to the committee. If the committee would like me to go back as a representative of this committee and to ask for removal of the 30B and bring back the opinions, I would be more than happy to do that, if you want me to do that. Or any other changes that you would like. I don't know if this is the forum to do it in or not at this point.
Maybe not, perhaps we can do this offline. I would like to suggest that was one of the issues I felt that Rubin and Rudman had commented on. And there was a question on Chapter 164 of the level of independence of the RMLD
Right.
relative to the towns, because the reason we're even in existence is for
Right.
that level of
Yep.
independence. And so whether it's the town HR person or the town's auditor or the town's law firm, all of which begin to, I don't like to use the word erode, but certainly impact the independence of the RMLD. And because of that, I think we need to be very careful about not being independent. And I would like to re-examine that perhaps in an offline.
Okay, that's fine. That's fine. Okay.
Okay, continue.
Yeah, why don't I just continue on? So other than that, the only other change that you can see under 4-10, under other committees, you'll see at the bottom of page 16, there was some language that allows us to appoint and dissolve standing ad hoc committees in terms of that. On page 17, it did not make the website here today, but in terms of Monday's meeting when we met, in terms of 4-11, that's actually, some of these have been renumbered, but the update has not made the website yet. In terms of the Charter Review Committee, they're actually, we voted on Monday night to set up a Charter Review Committee that would meet like every 10 years. It would have 9 members, 1 member of the Board of Selectmen, 1 member from the library, 1 member from this board or designee, in order to make sure that we're covered. I think there's 1 member of the school committee. There's 3 town meeting members in terms of that, so they meet every 10 years to review the charter. But there was discussion about whether or not the light board should even be on this charter review commission. In the end, I advocated that we should stay on and put on to cover our interest. Again, my concern is, if the they're.
I
There-
think
yeah.
I think it's a valid
Right.
concern, because we don't want to be in a position where the Charter Review Committee makes recommendations which are either unfulfillable, unsustainable, or illegal. And the
Right.
only way to influence that is to look at it while it's being developed, just as
Right.
you are now. I think
Right,
that's
right, and the
valid
thing is,
thing to do.
the one thing you have to remember is that a lot of our load is actually outside of Reading.
Correct.
I will say it here, but, people say this is Reading's Light Department. I correct people when they say that. This is not Reading's Light Department. This is the customers of the system's light department. It's not the Reading Light Department. So, anyhow. Yeah.
Any comments from other members of the commission?
Yeah. Again, we're still in the interim process. The Permanent Building Committee has been referred to the Board of Selectmen that you see there on the last page. So, in terms of that. So, and then, this is still.
How does that work?
Well, what the proposal was to create a permanent building committee, so anytime there's a building that we're gonna build, like the library or anything like that, that this permanent committee be consisted of like an engineer, a different people.
Who are familiar with it and.
Who are familiar
get
with
some
it. That was one of the
consistency.
things that was discussed in terms of that. But, the committee didn't see that was necessary to be put in here. We referred it over to the Board of Selectmen for their consideration. And there are some other controversial things in here. It's like the Board of Assessors right now is elected. The committee has taken position that should be appointed. We'll see where that goes. That has to go to town meeting on that at some point. So, again, this is up on the website.
What's the timeframe?
The
Phil?
time frame is to report back to, probably at this point, they're hoping to get this for the April town meeting. One of the things that has to happen is once this is all done, then town legal counsel is gonna totally review it at that point. They're hoping to get it done by the April town meeting at this point, but it would have to go to probably, whatever changes get approved has to go to be the electorate. So it has to get to the electorate sometime probably next year at this point, in terms of all the changes that get made here.
Once it's boiled down into more essence of
Right.
being ready for print, could I suggest that perhaps we submit it to Rubin and Rudman for
Absolutely.
their legal opinion on
Absolutely.
it, so that we
Absolutely.
try to head things off before they.
Absolutely, absolutely. We're up to section 5, I think is the next one we're up to.
Thank you.
Okay.
General Manager's report. Ms. O'Brien?
Good evening. I'd like to report on the organizational study. The organizational study, inclusive of a long-term system reliability study, is in its final draft stage. We have completed the matrix and benefits for evaluating qualified consultants. We are hopeful to release the RFP the first week of February and interview candidates as early as March. The study looks at overall staffing levels, skill sets, career development, succession planning, productivity and efficiency improvements, market wages, as well as the long-term reliability plan to provide capital layout and prioritization of these projects for over the next 25 years. Both components of the organizational study are intended to align with RMLD's staff and system with the required technologies to meet the next generation of electric industry challenges. So we can look forward to that being in the paper and the registry for potential consultants to bid on within the next month.
Thank you.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes, please. Go ahead.
Just a quick question. Can you give us some sense of what kind of inputs we would be providing to the organization that would conduct the study relative to goals for efficiency improvements and types of technologies that we would be looking at? Do they look at the organization blindly, or do we provide them some guidance and some input? And if so, what kind of input?
The first component, what generally happens is they'll start the reliability, and it could be two different consultants. We think one would probably work best, but we want to be able to at least look at companies that are experts in both fields. So when you start with the reliability, you're looking at power supply, the industry, and what shape and flexibility that your system needs to have over the next 25 years, okay? As we've talked here on a number of occasions, we'll look at peak shaving. So you want the system, you want to be able to get your voltage readings at the end of the system. You want your system to be able to be flexible enough to allow different customers to provide generation or whatever back onto the system, and to have those types of communication networks so that we can send signals and get signals back, okay? So we're communicating with our system, we're communicating with our customers. In addition to that, your reliability study also looks at all of your equipment and make sure that any major capital improvements like substation overhauls or circuit feeders, any type of system coordination protection is also done. And generally what they'll do is they'll take everything that needs to be done, they'll lay it out over 25 years, and a prioritization and something that's manageable with either staff, and depending on the severity of it, if you got a clump and you don't have enough, they'll probably make a recommendation to have some augmentation from consultants. But generally, they'll lay it out and they'll give you a funding schedule of what you need to look for. That we would then superimpose over our depreciation fund to make sure that that lines up. Because again, that reliability study will be chunked back into the 6-year plan and line up with our financials. That input then, so our goal, our message to them is we want to be flexible for peak shaving, here are our goals. And we want to be able to have engineers and energy services and the right people, the right customer service to be able to promote these type of programs. So with that, they roll those components into your organizational study. Now they're looking to say, okay, this is what you need now, this is what you need in 10 years, this is what you're going to need in 20 years. The types of people, the amounts of people that are right for this size utility with these right skill sets. If they don't have the skill sets, they'll help you come up with, and I've already started this, the career development plans for each of the job types. So you may find that some of your employees, the job descriptions are consolidated. Some of the job descriptions may change. Some people may have to have training. And it shakes out a lot of information that will come out of that. But that has to align with then what you're trying to achieve with your customers and your system. So it kind of works together. So those are the inputs. Does that?
No, that's a great
Okay.
broad overview and very helpful. Thank you. So we'll be providing them some sense of, what kind of goals we want to set for peak shaving, what kind of objectives we have for demand response, what are, or is that something that comes out of the process afterwards?
Yeah, that's probably, you can get into as much detail as you want. We're not trying to necessarily design the system. There can be general engineering changes that you would make, and then when you get to that point where in that year you're going to say you're going to do this, then you may design that, or you may get some help designing that.
Yeah.
It's more of an overview.
Yeah.
I mean, I will tell you right away that, without even having the study, that next year's focus will be in finishing and getting that GIS to be the tool that it needs to be for an engineering company, a utility with engineering in it. And that's going to be essential, because that will drive all of your groups. I mean, Jane's group, whatever group that will be their go-to tool. So when we have substation maintenance, which will come out of this. Instead of hiring contractors to help with substation maintenance, we'll be doing it ourselves. So we'll have to acquire those skill sets, but you will be using the GIS to, just like at the back of your manual in your car. It is time to change your oil. It is time to get your tune-up. It will come right out, right off the GIS and say, here you go. And then what happens is, based on the testing data, you can track and trend your equipment, so then you know when it needs to be replaced, and then you keep putting that into your reliability plan that just keeps rolling, so that you always have a 20-year plan.
So we'll have some sense of, for example, the energy efficiency engineer position that we've been talking about, we'll have some sense of what the return on investment for that head count would be?
Exactly.
Perfect.
Exactly.
Great.
And in addition to that, they'll also look at the market wages, and if people are not paid, or the productivity, or whatever. I mean, what will come out of that is recommendations of you know, how to solve those type of issues in your succession planning. Do you have people right behind those people that could step in and do the job? And that's important too, as you have an aging workforce that was noted in your 2008 strategic plan.
That's very helpful, thank you. I think it's important that the communities understand what else going into this and any assumptions that we're making, so they can understand transparently exactly the conversation we're all having behind the scenes. Thank you, that's very helpful.
Yeah.
Question?
Yes.
Thanks. When are you gonna put this out to bid, or when will the language be in terms of defining what they?
Right now, we're just about done with the language, and then it goes to purchasing. They put the legal front half and back half on the RFP, so it can be put in the, you know, there's a number of ways that it has to be registered so that people can bid on it. And then it usually takes about a month for all the bids to come in. You open the bids, and we have to put a team together to interview the consultants and look at some of their work, so.
When are you putting it out to bid?
First week of February, hopefully. Yeah.
Any other questions? Good. I think we're up to item number 8, the power supply report.
Good evening, everyone. I'm here to report on the December purchase power. RMLD's load for December was 60.8 million kilowatt hours, and that was an increase of about 2.7% when you compare that to December of the prior year. Our energy costs for the month were at 3.67 million, and that's equivalent to approximately 6 cents per kilowatt hour. The December fuel charge adjustment was set at 4 cents per kilowatt hour, and RMLD sales totaled 51.6 million kilowatt hours. The RMLD undercollected by 1.6 million, and that resulted in the deferred fuel cash reserve balance of 2.375, which is in line with the target of $2 to $3 million. The January fuel charge adjustment was set at 4.5 cents, and it's projected in February to go to 5 cents per kilowatt hour. The RMLD purchased about 15% of our energy requirements from the spot market at an average cost of $131 per megawatt hour. And just to inform the board, because of the cold weather that we've incurred in December as well as in January, New England is faced with a natural gas constraint where their generators do not have firm contracts to import the gas into the region. The ISO had taken this up in the fall, and they had procured with several of the generators to have dual fuel. And so a lot of the generators currently are burning oil, which is at a much higher cost. The average prices have ranged in the $200 to $300 per megawatt hour. And back in December, on December 14th, it hit a high of $800. RMLD is in the market for only 15% of our power. We also have a portfolio of generators, such as our Stony Brook units, that are actually running in excess of what our requirements are. So we'll be receiving a credit for that generation at the average hourly LMPs to offset the average cost of the fuel burned. So that's just one of the situations of being in New England and having constrained gas. The residential customers are the preferred. They receive their gas heating first, and the generators are secondary. So that's just a resultant that I wanted to share with the board.
And that's having a major impact, though, on NSTAR and are the other ISO-owned
Yeah,
facilities, right? I
yeah,
mean,
our fuel charge, we have a portfolio of resources that we utilize to meet our security, our requirement. NSTAR and NGRID have to go out to bid every 6 months, so as a result of that, you know, their rates have increased significantly for the whole 6-month period.
Huge increases, I mean, 24% and 37%, as I recall.
That's
on top of already almost double what RMLD's costs are.
correct. We are fairly attractive when you make the rate comparison, that's correct.
Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, quick question. Is there any concern about the dual fuel? Did ISO do a good job of planning to make sure there's sufficient reserves?
Yeah,
and-
we've had no situations. There was a shortage event called on the 14th. They enacted demand response, and I believe over 90% of the demand response showed up. So, you know, it's just high prices, but from a reliability standpoint, there's been minimal issues. It's just higher prices. On the capacity side, the RMLD's peak demand for December was approximately 116 megawatts, and this occurred on December 17th at 6 o'clock with an average temperature of 16 degrees. This compares to a peak demand a year ago of about 109, so that was about 7 megawatts lower. And a year ago, the average temperature at that time was 34 degrees. So this past December was considerably colder than the previous one. RMLD's monthly capacity requirements was 215 megawatts, and the total capacity dollars for December came in at 1.47 million, and that's equivalent to a little under $7 a kilowatt month. If I could, if you don't mind kind of getting off on this a little, there was a recent article in the local papers about the Brayton Station. That's located in Somerset, Mass. It's a coal-fired unit. For capacity purposes, the ISO has set up a program where we look 3 years out for capacity, and we have to reserve our portion plus a reserve based on our historical peak demand. So Brayton Point, which is the second largest generator in New England, has informed the ISO that they plan on retiring come June of 2017. That, along with the Vermont Yankee retirement and the Salem Harbor retirement, are currently projecting New England to have a deficit of resources. And so based on these forward auctions, it's highly probable that these auctions are going to clear based on new generation, which is going to be significantly higher than the current market. Currently, the market's around $3.50 a kilowatt month. The Salem Harbor is causing the NEMA load zone, which Reading is part of, to go to $15 per kilowatt month, and this will only exacerbate those costs, the Brayton Point. And so we're working diligently to look forward to see what kind of programs we can implement to manage those peak demands, because that's the only way we're able to hedge those future higher costs.
Jane, is it likely that Brayton Point will be replaced in a similar fashion to Salem Harbor?
It's difficult to tell at this point because Footprint came in to replace Salem Harbor. I don't believe they have their full funding yet, and so it'll be interesting to see whether they actually show up in that time period. But with higher prices, you're bound to attract merchant generation plants. It's just a matter of them getting the financing, and the way the ISO markets are structured, you know, they really need those long-term contracts to back them in order to have that guaranteed revenue stream. You know, the ISO market can peak for, you know, they can lock it in for 5 years, and then they have to cover the balance of their debt service. So it's a tricky little market in terms of the capacity market, but the ISO is working diligently, and we're trying to react to those new market rules that are being put in place.
So the capacity might be replaced, but either way, prices are going to be.
Capacity
going
has
up.
to be replaced because in order to maintain reliability, they're going to need more generation unless, you know, usage goes down significantly. But we're talking in excess of 1,000 megawatts that need to be replaced, and it's difficult to get that much demand response. You're going to need some generation, so there will definitely be new generation.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Going back to my report, Table 4 shows both our capacity and our energy costs, as well as the energy generated in kilowatt hours. The December cost for capacity and energy came in a little over 8 cents per kilowatt hour, And for the month of December, approximately 6.6% of our energy was purchased from hydro generation. Table 5 lists the 4 hydro projects where RMLD receives RECs per the purchase power agreements. RMLD has 16,400 RECs for the calendar year 2013. RMLD has sold around 4,600 of those RECs for a total of $245,000. That amount was credited against the fuel costs in October, and the current market value for the remaining RECs is approximately $562,000. RMLD is in the process of reviewing a REC sales agreement with a buyer for quarters 2 and 3 RECs, which equate to a little over 8,700 RECs, and that total price would be $476. And per the current policy, that gets applied to the fuel charge so that all our customers receive the benefit of the sale of those RECs.
Excellent.
On Table 6, we talk about transmission. Our cost for transmission for the month of December came in at $805,000, and that's approximately a 19% increase from November. And then my last 2 tables, Tables 7 and 8, talk about our energy efficiency programs. RMLD processed 9 commercial rebates for the November-December time period, totaling approximately a little less than $70,000, bringing the total for the fiscal year to approximately $138,000. RMLD calculates the capacity savings on the commercials of approximately 433 kilowatts of capacity savings and about 1,500 megawatt hours in energy savings. On the residential side, we calculate about 102 kilowatts worth of capacity savings and 80 megawatt hours of energy savings. To date, RMLD has processed 662 residential rebates totaling $31,600, and 199 RMLD customers have had audits to help their efficiency within their home, and that was for a total of $39,800. That completes my report.
Great. Thank you very much, Jan. Very good. Any other questions for Ms. Parenteau? If not, we can move on to the financial report. Mr. Fournier?
Good evening.
Good evening.
Tonight I'll be presenting the December financials, which represent the first 6 months of this fiscal year. For the month of December, the net loss, the negative change in net assets, was about $1.8 million, which decreased our net income to about $161,000. The year-to-date budget net income was at $2.9 million, resulting net income being under budget by about $2.8 million. The actual year-to-date fuel expenses exceeded fuel revenues by $234,000. On the revenue side, page 11B, the year-to-date base revenues are under budget by $1.1 million, or about 4.5%. Actual base revenues are at $23.6 million compared to the budgeted amount of $24.7 million. On the expense side, page 12A, year-to-date purchase power base expense was over budget by about $73,000, or less than 0.5%. The actual purchase power base cost came in at $14.8 million compared to the budgeted amount of $14.7 million. On the operating and maintenance side, those expenses combined are under budget by about $300,000, or 4.5%. The actual O&M expense came in at $6.1 compared to the budgeted amount of $6.4 million. Depreciation of voluntary payments to the 4 towns were on budget. Looking at the cash section, page 9, operating fund is a little over $10 million. The capital fund balance is at $4.5 million. Rate stabilization is at $6.7 million. Deferred fuels at $2.3 million. And the energy conservation fund is at $411,000. On the general information side, looking at page 5, year-to-date kilowatt-hour sales came in at 362 million kilowatt-hours, which is about 5.4 million kilowatt-hours, about 1.5% behind last year's actual figure. The guard revenues collected year-to-date with $362,000, which brings our total collected since inception to about $2.4 million. On the budget side, cumulatively, the 5 divisions were under budget by about $300,000, or 2.8%.
Any questions for Mr. Fournier? If not,
So, the net income is missing by 95%, is that right?
Compared to the budget, yes.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that's reflective of just what we've been seeing, I think, in terms of decrease in revenue
Talking about that further.
and the budget not, budget's a budget, it's not reality, right? Yeah. Thank you very much. We're on to item number 10, which is tab D, or the various pieces of equipment.
Okay. Ready for the motion? Yep. Under the first one, move that bid 2014-12 for single phase pad-mounted FR3 transformers be awarded to Wesco for a total cost of $149,855 as the lowest qualified bidder on the recommendation of the general manager.
You have a second?
Second.
Any discussion?
Need a setup or anything?
If not,
Quick question,
yes,
Mr. Chairman.
question? Yes, please. go ahead.
When you guys go out to bid on these, they're all bidding apples and apples. It's all the same exact transformer, so when you go to a company, they can't spec anything different, so you tell them what you're looking for.
That was my understanding, yes, is that this is not the first time, so they've done this many times before, and they've go to the companies. As a matter of fact, as I recall, the bid goes out to many people who
Correct.
choose not to bid even
Right.
on it.
Okay.
And I don't know how many times they repeat that process, but
Just for personal information, I had never seen a bid opening, so I went to this one, not realizing just how many there were. And she runs a tight ship when this is bid. The bidders, they have to go through a lot of paperwork. There's a lot of forms. Probably you and your business have the same thing. And the bidders would sometimes say, yes, that form is there. Can you look a little harder, please? Nobody was disqualified for lack of paper.
Information.
may I see a show of hands for approval of the
Yep.
bridges? Thank you.
Okay, ready for the next one?
Please.
Okay. Move that bid 2014-13 for single-phase pole-mounted transformers be awarded to Wesco for a total cost of $99,792 as the lowest qualified bidder on the recommendation of the general manager.
May I have a second?
Second?
Discussion? If no discussion, may I see a show of hands for approval?
Yep.
Thank you. No, please.
Next one, okay. Move that bid 2014-14 for three-phase pad-mounted transformers be awarded to Wesco for a total cost of $143,869 as the lowest qualified bidder on the recommendation of the general manager.
Second, please.
Second?
Discussion? If there's no discussion, may I see a show of hands? Thank you for yea.
And last one, move that bid 2014-15 for three-phase pole-mounted transformers be awarded to Wesco for a total cost of $62,625 as the lowest qualified bidder on the recommendation of the general manager.
Second?
Second?
Discussion? No discussion, may I see a show of hands for approval? Thank you.
One more.
One more.
Okay. Move that bid 2014-16 for 15 kV aerial spacer cable be awarded to Arthur Hurley for a total cost of $58,275 as the lowest qualified bidder on the recommendation of the general manager.
May I have a second?
Second?
Discussion?
Just one item, Mr.
Please do.
Chairman. I am going to abstain from this because Mr. Hurley, I believe, gets his insurance bonds from a client of mine. So I am going to abstain
Thank you.
as, to avoid any potential conflict of interest.
Any other comments? If not, may I see a show of hands? Approval? Thank you.
One abstention.
With one abstention.
Yes.
Thank you. We're on to item number 11, the cost of service study. consideration of rate adjustment. And Ms. O'Brien, I believe that's tab E, and you're going to be discussing that?
Thank you. The RMLD is seeking an approximate 5% increase, I should say was. This past Friday, we received our January revenues, as Bob Forney had indicated, giving us 7 months of actual and 5 months of projected. The December sales income is down, that we received in January is down from last year. However, with a shift to capital outlay projects and the vacancies, we were able to rerun the numbers with a savings of $300,000 from these expense savings. And as Bob mentioned, all 5 divisions are under budget. With this $300,000 savings, the numbers came in now with the increase recommendation at approximately 4.5%. The approximate increase can vary slightly depending on the rate class and the usage. Should I want to explain a little bit? Okay.
Please do.
So the increase is due to an unrealized projected sales over the past several years. The RMLD by law must cover its production costs as well as maintain sound financial positioning with low-risk credit rating for attracting and securing low-cost power supply and meeting its financial commitments. The RMLD has not had an increase in well over 3 years, and with the increase will remain amongst the lowest in the state. The increase ensures an acceptable financial standing for the remainder of the fiscal year and is projected to come in at approximately $500,000 less than the approved budget. Expenses were evaluated and lessened without adversely impacting our excellent reliability. Unfortunately for this situation, we only have 5 months to cover costs, and therefore a gradual increase is not an option. To mitigate any further unexpected rate increases, RMLD has begun a full cost of service study, as I mentioned earlier, and is formulating a 6-year forecast plan. This 6-year plan will be made available to all CAB members and town managers so that we can all work proactively to ensure that we have successful budgets. The cost of service study is due later this spring, and if there is any further increase determined, we are working to ensure that the information can be disseminated appropriately into the FY15 budget process. Please understand that the power supply fuel portion of the bill is by law a pass-through and can fluctuate monthly. Contingencies in everyone's budget to address these fluctuations is prudent. Over the last several years, power fuel costs have decreased, most likely from natural gas prices, more than the proposed increase, meaning that there has been a $7 million in decrease versus a $1.6 million increase as in reflecting of this increase that I'm requesting. The net has been an overall savings for all of our customers. However, I need to caution that the power fuel prices are beginning to escalate, and all of New England Electric customers will be experiencing larger impact within the next several years. This is based on a number of imminent charges, as Jane mentioned, from the isoelectric grid system, including major transmission bills and the absence of sufficient area generators. RMLD will keep its 6-year forecast up to date and will issue press releases to keep our customers apprised of these industry charges. With that, I turn it back to you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you very much.
You want the motion at this point?
Yes, well, we can do the motion at this point, or we can get public input relative to this.
When we go, you want to go to the motion?
Yeah, why don't we do the
Yeah.
motion first, and then we'll get public input.
Right. Move that the Reading Municipal Light Department Board of Commissioners approve the adoption of the rates MDPU numbers 228, 229, 230, 231, 232, 233, 234, 235, dated to be filed January 30th, 2014, on the recommendation of the General Manager.
May I have a second?
Second?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Discussion, please?
Can I make my presentation?
Yes, I would,
Yeah.
Commissioner Pacino would like to do a presentation, and then we'd certainly like to open the floor to anyone else who would like to discuss things.
Can you hear me okay? Okay. One of the things I thought would be good is to go back and revisit how the RMLD works here. Basically, you have your rates that are at the top here. From your rates come the power supply, which includes your power, your transmission, your distribution costs that come off of there. Your operating expenses, which is the all your people in the building here and all the other costs to run the department here. From that also comes the depreciation fund. From that, we're allowed up to 3%. I don't know exactly what number we are at. Are we at 3%, or is it 2?
3.7 million based on $120 million.
Now, the depreciation fund is to be used for construction to maintain the reliability of your system. Bob, correct me if I make any bad statements, okay? The next one is the above-the-line payments. These are the payments that are made to the 4 towns that are basically put in place by special legislation that at the time of the 20-year agreement as to based upon the amount of plant that's in each town and the usage in each town. This was all part of the 20-year agreement. This is special legislation that we actually went up to the State House and actually got in terms of putting this in place. That gives you a net. That net allowed is the 8%. Am I doing okay, Bob? Good, good. That is the 8%. Now, RMLD in the past used to get up to the 8%. In recent times, we have just, wherever this number falls, it falls. One of the great things that, you know, if the economy comes back and we get more than we have, and we go over the 8%, one of the great privileges this board has, and we've done in the past, is refund money to the customers.
That's right. Yep.
That's a vote that, you know, I think all of us would love to take. From the 8%, there are 2 places that it goes. One is the return on investment, that's to the town of Reading. The town of Reading actually, you know, took the risk of building the department, and if the department ever disappears, the town of Reading actually would be responsible for all the liabilities that are out there at this point. That number is set at the time of the 20-year agreement, that number was set, it was capped at that, plus it's raised each year by the cost of living. And I think a couple of years ago, the point's been made that the cost of living actually went down, so we decreased the payment to the town. I think is the point that was made. That there is a committee that's been set up, that's in the mechanism. I believe it's 2 members of the Board of Selectmen, 2 members of this commission, and 1 member of the CAB that review this. Now, if there's going to be a change of this number here, it's been looked at least 2 times during my tenure. The time it really went into place, and then I believe maybe about 10 years ago, the CAB, I believe Roger Lassard may be able to, was part of that, look at this again. The only reason it's adjusted by the cost of living each year is because nobody's come up with a better formula. You know, I think any of us would certainly be listening if there was a better formula as to come up with this. But there is a committee that sets this up. Now, what doesn't go to that net, to the town of Reading, goes back into construction. This is your reliability. This is the risk that you take. I see basically, in terms of where this rate increase is coming here, if this rate increase is not put in place at this point, we're potentially affecting this number here, and which is the reliability of the system. And that's why, you know, I'm intending to vote for the rate increase that's been proposed, the motion. And these are my reasons why, is because it would affect this number here, which is the reliability of the system. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you very much, Commissioner. I'd like, anyone else would care to make a statement?
Thank you. Michael Prisco, 12 Bishop's Way, North Reading, Mass., Board of Selectmen member. First, I'd like to just take the opportunity to congratulate the board on your selection of Mrs. O'Brien. She was nice enough to come out and visit the board at one of our meetings. We had a great conversation. We could tell right away you definitely made a great choice.
Thank you.
And we're looking forward to working with you. And thank you for listening to us and taking our concerns back to the board as well. A couple questions to make sure I understand it. When Mr. Norton had originally told us about the increase, I think we were talking an increase slightly more than what you just are going to improve. So it's a 4.5% increase for this year only, right? And then next year is going to be considering another increase in a similar?
We're waiting for the cost of service. We couldn't wait for the cost of service to address the needs between now and the end of the fiscal year. But the cost of service will help take the production costs and everything that Commissioner Pacino has gone over, and the cost of service basically splits the pie and allocates it appropriately in a variety of different rate designs, including this time we'll have a new low-income rate, and we'll also have an LED streetlight rate that's being included in that. That cost of service study is due later in the spring. Just to clarify the larger percentage, at the onset of the conversation of this rate increase, when we were we were explaining how the 5% was derived, this 9% number came up as it affected the base portions, embedded portions of the rate.
Okay.
And then it just kind of took off, but really it was part of explaining how we derived the 5%. I apologize for that.
Oh, it's okay.
So,
It's explained now.
To answer your question, the cost of service study is be looking at the next 6 years, and at this time internally with staff, I think we're looking at just about 1% or something, but that's just our internal to give you an idea, but the cost of service may have allocations that have to be presented to the board or whatever. So maybe a slight increase, I can't really say at this time.
Okay.
But I just know that once it gets on that 6-year plan and that gets updated every year,
Yep.
you'll be able to know exactly what's coming down the pike, especially those concerns that Jane raised that are going to be affecting all of New England.
Okay. This is an understandable increase, now that you've explained it. I think Mr. Fode as well, I think we're both in agreement that it's probably an understandable increase of 4.5%. You mentioned this low-income rate. Now, that's something you don't offer today, and that's one of the reasons I wanted to get up and speak today. You know, we have a sizable senior community in North Reading, and so any increase on our seniors with a fixed income is going to be pretty significant. So I'd urge the board, if you can find creative ways, maybe a senior rate exemption or something that we could offer our seniors in all the communities, I think that would go a long way. Even if, you know, the people that are outside that senior age group, if they have to take a little bit more on, I'd rather see that than us hurt our seniors any more than. So if you could give that some consideration, maybe it's something you can even consider before you make your vote, which may have a smaller effect on the percentage.
The commission voted on it at the last meeting to include it in the cost of service study, so I'm
Okay.
pretty confident that it's probably something that will be voted on when that's done. In fact, Commissioner Soley had mentioned to me earlier, it would be nice if we could even vote on that, if we could pull that out of it in a preliminary way so
would be
that
nice.
we're limiting the increase to those customers. But coming up with the administration, the logistics of the program, how you qualify, how people can send in the paperwork to qualify, we'll still need to set that up. So it's a little bit premature to send out releases on how the customers would go about that, but it'll be here shortly.
That's great. Very good. Thank you. That's all I have. Thanks.
Prisco, thank you very
for
much.
your kind words.
Did you, Commissioner Taylor, would you also like to make a comment in terms of a suggestion?
Yes, I would. I've been drafting an op-ed that I circulated earlier at the meeting, earlier before the meeting, that I'll be putting out in the papers tomorrow, which builds on some of the things that we've been trying to do in terms of peak shaving, and really tries to promote the ideas and explain how important they are. And to the gentleman's point in North Reading, I mean, one thing people can do is if they have an electric water heater, get the word out, because there's very few of them that are enrolled. People can get as much as $200 back a year to let us shut them off for a couple hours. And that also helps us save a lot of money. And then, again, the time of use, in my own house, I save $15 to $20 a month by shifting some of my use outside of the 12 to 7 bracket. And I've just noticed it. I did the math. I do the kilowatt hour math. If I had the flat rate, I'd be paying $15 to $20 more. So people can do that if they can shift their demand. It also helps us. And in the piece tomorrow, building on numbers that Bill Selden and Jane Parenteau generated over the summer, which thank you very much for that, we'll lay it all out hopefully pretty clearly. And I think we all understand that peak shaving is a crucial thing, and I know Colleen is working hard on that from all perspectives. As part of that, as I look at the rates, I wonder whether we could consider, given the small number of people that are in time of use now, exempting the off-peak portion, because there's only a couple hundred people on it, but it would send a powerful signal in the coverage, and the press coverage is going to ensue from the rate increase, that we've made this one part even better, and it's a teachable moment for the public. it will have virtually no impact, I would say, on what revenue produces. And if you think it does, we could adjust the on-peak portion just a little bit higher so that it evens out. But just to be able to say, out of this coverage that's going to ensue, and I could include it in the thing I'm writing, is that, hey, this program just got even better. And there'll be no increase for the off-peak and maybe a little more for the on-peak. I'm just wondering if this is something we could just do now, tweak those decimal points a tiny bit, but in particular to leave the off-peak rate alone. I noticed the industrial one is a lot lower than the residential one anyway. But I just wanted to throw that out there for consideration.
So the intent would be to encourage people to adopt
a program that I think we all know works, and we need people to learn about. And by not changing it and exempting the off-peak portion, it's a moment where we can say, really draw a lot of attention to it.
Now, without having gone through the spreadsheets and whatnot, we don't have a good feel for that, what that sway is. We think it's going to be relatively small.
So 300 people in the
Colleen, would you
program.
have any comment on that?
We have
Is it 500?
514 people in the water heater program, and I think there was a
300
study.
in the TOU I'm talking about.
Oh, in the TOU, I'm
It's
sorry.
like 350. Sorry, I didn't mean to
Yeah,
interrupt.
no, that's okay. I was back to the water heater. In the water heater, we have 514, and they're estimating there to be between 2,000 and 4,000 heaters out there that we could address. So I think in your op-ed, you're going to help us provide contact names here to call.
Right, that's for water heaters.
So we're looking for water heater customers. On the time of use, I can talk to Jane about looking at the numbers. I know as part of the cost of service study, we're looking at the incentive of that program and making sure that it is consistent with everything else that we're trying to put together. But I will talk to Jane to see if there's anything we can do in the interim to make it a little bit more attractive. And I can't tell you that right this second, but I could email you tomorrow maybe,
That's
or
fine.
Monday.
I guess what I want to put out for consideration is that when we vote on these increases tonight, we exempt the off-peak portion of the time of use for the residential, and just to really have it be a moment where we can teach people about it. I think with 300 people enrolled in the program, and we're talking about a half a cent, it's not going to be making any difference in our overall numbers. I mean, it's going to be.
Could we just
Commissioner-
ask the Energy Services Manager just if she can speak to that for a second?
Well, can I-
And yes, while you're doing that,
can I raise an issue here?
Commissioner Patino, please.
An issue of logistics here. I believe if we were going to vote that has to go back to the CAB under the 20-year agreement.
For a rate change.
That particular, and that's going to hold up the increase. I appreciate what you're trying to do, and I think going forward, it's a great idea. It's a great idea in the cost of service study, but I believe it will.
I thought we had to go back to, I'm sorry, Mr. Chairman, may I just answer that?
No, go right ahead, please.
That things only have to go back to them if it's above some threshold, which this would be way below.
Any change in rates would have to go back to them under the agreement.
But this is actually not changing that particular rate,
Well,
so.
Yeah.
I think it's.
I mean, it's not.
Is there another way to address this, and that's to encourage people by,
Right.
if, assuming we go to the vote tonight without that,
Right.
is there another mechanism to basically make it even sweeter to use at time of use?
Well, again, the cost of service will attempt to make it an incentive that will work, and that will be done in time before the summer, before the next round of peaks that we're really concerned about. So that's a good thing. So it's only another couple months away. I'd have to look into whether or not that qualified to have to go back to the cab or not. Can I defer to you?
It only,
You know,
Rate
we
change.
probably don't want to delay
Yeah.
this.
we don't want to delay anything. I didn't know it would trigger all this.
Absolutely.
Well, to be honest with you, I think it's a great idea,
Yeah.
and it's something
Yes.
going forward. I think the board is fully behind you on this one,
It is.
in terms of
Absolutely.
going forward on this,
I
absolutely.
mean, even if it meant increasing the other side of it a notch, I mean, the point is to make that deal even sweeter,
Right.
you know, and more attractive for people to want to buy in.
Yeah.
So is the answer that we can't do it legally, or is it?
We don't know that, so I think we're gonna have to table that, because we don't want to take on, we love the idea. So there's no question we like it.
Not
We're
enough
gonna-
to
I
show the
know.
courage of our convictions.
No, no, not another month.
Yes.
What I would like to ask, though, just changing topics a little bit, is Commissioner Solly, do you have an addendum that you'd like to?
No,
this?
I don't, but a couple bits, small bits of good news. As part of the changes here, what has been known as the hazardous waste charge, 1/10 of a penny per kilowatt hour will be ending. So, very, very small, but in the right direction. And I'd like to point out why the increase, had the board not been so busy hiring Colleen and just dealing with all that, if we'd seen it in the budget and we had done this for the whole year, because we got a fixed amount of money that we got to hit, and we're, as was pointed out earlier, we're way the heck behind. And we only have 5 months to make it up. Now, if we had looked a little bit harder at the budget and said, when we adopted last year's budget, we need to raise prices a little bit, it would have been about a 2% change. Now, the money the customers are going to pay would be the same, but now it would have been over a 12-month period instead of a 5-month period. So I'm guessing that maybe for next year, this 2%, this 4.5% will revert to maybe in the 2%, and then inflationary stuff has to be figured in. So I'm hopeful that the study results.
We are all hopeful, yes. Is there any other comment?
Yeah, Mr. Chairman.
Please, go ahead.
I agree with Commissioner Solly. It would have been nice if you guys, if it would have been picked up and we would have been able to do this much easier. I think timing was a big part of this.
Yes, it was.
And nobody likes to be the new GM and bring this bad news out. I have to give her credit. It's not easy to stand right up there and deliver this type of news.
Absolutely.
I was pleased to see it drop to 4.5. At least that shows some of you're exploring and identifying some other areas. That's, you're aware of what the CAB put forward for you
Yes.
guys for our recommendation. Yeah, I'm not sure where to go on it. You know, I did make a comment of the CPI for the payment to the town of Reading, you know, and I was just going back 10 years for that increase, and Commissioner Solly pointed out that 1 out of those 10 years, it did drop. I think it was 0.5%, you know, originally, but out of 10 years in increased payments. My only concern on that was that when the RMLD is not doing so well, the increased payments are still going out, so that's one of my concerns on it. So, I mean, maybe that is something that we have to look at, you know, when
It's possible. Sure.
when things aren't going so well here, you know, the payout isn't so well. Something that we have to look at, so just
Take that under consideration. I think that's a good suggestion.
just a reminder of what was passed along from the CAB also.
If there's one more comment?
Yeah,
please,
just
go
one
ahead.
more comment to me. In terms of the payment to the town, I mean, again, that was just set at what it was and it's adjusted each year. And I know in the past, the CAB did look at that, and nobody's come up with a better formula. I'm sure, you know, I've never been happy with that formula, but, you know, if nobody's come up with a better one. So if somebody, you know, if the CAB wants to go and look at that, I don't think I'd object to that at all.
Maybe
And
that's
I
something we
do
have to-
want to compliment, you mentioned something in terms of the general manager coming forward and bringing this at this point and I think, you know, she deserves some credit for bringing this issue forward.
Oh,
And coming forward and bringing this issue to the forefront.
Mr.
Chairman?
Yes, please go ahead.
This is somewhat tangential, but I think it builds off on what Mr. Bruce just said. I'd be curious when we get to the point of talking about the cost of service study to hear a little bit more about the inputs we've provided to Mayhew in that regard, largely because I've not yet heard discussion about how we set the rate of return, what kind of factors we put into that, whether or not you've had discussion with any of the selectmen in the other towns or with the town of Reading in terms of how that 20-year agreement is structured, whether there's any willingness to have flexibility around that, and if that could in some way be a benefit to the customer at the end of that conversation. So in other words, all of those numbers get fixed into the mix of how we set our rates. And I, at some point, not necessarily now because we're talking about a specific rate increase, I'd like to hear a little bit more about whether we've examined and what we've examined in terms of inputs for the cost of service study.
Thank you.
Right now, we're still just, we're putting together, we've started the FY15 budget process, and Mayhew is waiting for those numbers to put into his modeling system. This is why it's taking a little bit longer, because he's waiting on us, and then the ball will start rolling. And then the presentations will be very transparent, and you'll see all of the assumptions that are being made clearly.
Right. I think it's a great discussion to have. I know it's very sensitive for folks to talk about the town payments and the 20-year agreement, but I think we owe it to the customer as we look at putting in a model that we're going to have that's going to guide rates for the next 6 years. If I understand you correctly about how that model gets built.
Maybe I'm looking at you a little confused because, and correct me if I'm wrong, Bob, but again, as Mr. Pacino has pointed out, the cost of service really targets your net income at your 8%, which you're including your above-the-line payments, your lieu of tax payments to the towns.
Yeah.
And based on your 20-year plan. So since we've got 17 more years of that, that would be incorporated. But
Hopefully
other
more
than
than
that,
that, I
you
hope.
have a net income of the 8, which I don't think RMLD has made close to 8 in a long time. It's usually between 5.5% and 6.5%. And I think it's targeted for that because, you know, you don't have to make 8. That's not keeping the rates the lowest. So we want to make sure that we maintain a rate of return that gives us, allows us to make our commitments and also provides enough of a buffer at the end so to augment any catastrophic event, like to help with the fuel fund or help with the depreciation fund if you had a catastrophic failure of your equipment. So around $2 million is what's left at the end of the day. That's around 5% rate of return, 5 to 5.5% rate of return, not even close to 8. But maybe, Jane, maybe I'm wrong, but the cost of service study wouldn't take into consideration anything because RMLD can do whatever they really want to do with that 8%. So I'm confused as to how the payment to Reading would go into the cost of service.
What I'd like,
We should move that to
what I'd like to
another-
suggest
yes.
is why don't we
Okay.
table that
Exactly.
discussion to a different time?
I'm sorry, I just didn't
No,
understand.
it's exactly the kind of discussion that would be very helpful for me, and I don't mean to distract from that. So
Sure.
let's continue that.
Mr. Chairman.
Yes, please go ahead, George.
One more comment, and this is for the other communities that are out there. I think it's our responsibility that we communicate a little bit better to the other towns that are out there, including Wilmington. One of the things we want to do is we do our fiscal budget, and just getting that out there, even though we deal with residential ratepayers and commercial ratepayers, we talk school buildings and municipal buildings also. These ratepayers are also taxpayers, and they're affected by that, and when we do our budget. So if we can communicate better to these communities in consideration when we're doing our budget.
So there's a timing issue is what you're
Timing issue is
suggesting that we
a
should
big thing also.
be
That-
aware of, yes, right.
Because we were coming in a lot of it right in the middle of our budget. As you guys are aware, you'll be doing yours, so.
I think that's an excellent suggestion, and
Yeah,
again,
exactly.
it's a thing that we're learning from history, right? I mean, that's the issue here. We've had a stumbling over the last year in a couple of different areas, and we're trying to play catch-up now, and lessons learned.
Yep, absolutely.
We can do this moving forward. We've taken it as an issue. There's no more discussion. I'd like to ask for a vote of those in favor of the motion. It'll be shown that It's unanimous vote for the motion as read.
Very good.
I'd also like to say, just a comment that, and I think I speak for everyone on the board here, that the Board of Commissioners would like to thank everyone involved in this very difficult process, and it has been a very difficult process, considering a rate increase. I want to thank the selectmen in all the towns, because I know that the issues that you face from timing and in the middle of the budget and the constituencies that you have to deal with, et cetera, and no one likes a rate increase. I mean, we're all customers as well, and we don't want a rate increase, certainly. And I'd also like to thank, though, the CAB for their consideration, and the staff of the RMLD for doing probably 14,000 analyses one way or the other in terms of trying to get to something that's reasonable, given the light of what our competitors are doing and what the history of the RMLD has been in terms of serving the community. But at the end of the day, we have to, by state mandate, be physically sound. And that's, overrules just about everything else that we do. But I just wanted to say thank you to everyone who's been involved in this process, and it's been maintained at a very high level, and I think it's been a great teaching aid for us to do it better the next time. If we, I don't want to suggest there is a next time, but if we ever have to have a next time. So in any event, that's that. In terms of general discussion, I believe we've had that. Let's see, we've got the next RMLD board meeting is Thursday, February 27th. And I think Thursday was chosen for, there was a conflict on Wednesday, or?
Right, and plus we were migrating towards Thursday at one point as well.
Okay, good.
The board has no objection.
Great.
So we're
And
gonna make that, or Thursday's gonna be a regular, is what we're trying to do?
It's up to you.
I would prefer a Thursday myself on a personal basis, but I'm
Okay.
certainly open to the board to.
I just
to,
prefer that would be the same, third, whatever it is, if it's the fourth, of
Well,
whatever
we'll stick
Wednesday,
with-
Thursday
we'll
it
go with
is,
Thursdays then.
each month would be fine.
Okay, good.
So that
So
can
Thursday
just,
would
you
be,
know.
if no one has an objection, we'd like to move it to Thursdays.
All right, then we'll do it that way.
Thank you.
And it'll be that way going forward, very good.
Okay.
The Citizens Advisory Board meeting is, next one is Wednesday, March 12th, I believe, George. Is that, it says tentative here.
It
but
is a
that-
tentative meeting, yes.
Okay, great.
Thursday.
Could I get a motion to move into executive session?
Yes, Mr. Chairman, whenever you're ready.
Yes, please.
Move that the commission go into executive session to approve the executive session meeting minutes based on Chapter 164, Section 47D, exemption from public records and open meeting requirements in certain instances, to discuss mediation and union negotiation updates, and to return to regular session for the sole purpose of adjournment.
Second, please.
Second.
Thank you. See a show of hands?
Poll the board.
Poll the board? Yay.
Aye.
Mr. Pacino, aye.
Aye. Aye. Okay, so moved.
All right, very good. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you, everyone.